The Neptune type was a design of small starship in service with the United Earth during the early 22nd century. The ship was among the most advanced designs humanity had ever built at the time of its introduction, but it was quickly supplanted by the later Intrepid and Enterprise type starships and would not remain in service following the Romulan War. Known in official documents as the N3 class under the United Earth Combined Starfleet Classification System, the Neptune measured in at 127 meters long, 115 meters wide, and was 18 meters tall. As built, the Neptune was armed with 2 multi-aperture phase cannon and 2 munitions launchers, which initially fired spatial torpedoes before the introduction of the photonic torpedo during the 2150s. The ship had a cruising speed of warp factor 2.5 and could manage speeds in the range of warp factor 3.2 to 3.9, depending on the specific ship in question and year. With a crew of roughly 40 persons, the ship primarily acted as a patrol cruiser and defensive warship around UE-controlled systems. After the combination of the United Earth Space Probe Agency, UESPA, United Earth Stellar Navy, UESN, and United Earth Colonial Authority, UECA, into the singular United Earth Combined Starfleet in the 2130s, the new organization conducted a series of studies which examined the vessels available to the organization and the missions the new organization was responsible for performing. Starfleet concluded that a series of new ship design classes were needed, which would be focused on the roles of defense and colonial support, fitting them into the N-type classification. The new ship was meant to have a relatively high speed for the time, and be capable of operating with only basic support facilities for extended periods, allowing it to remain in distant colonies for long stretches of time in between refit and recovery periods in the Sol system. Planning began officially in 2137, with the first vessel of the class, Starfleet's first purpose-built starship, the Neptune, arriving in service in 2141. A further 9 ships in the initial batch of vessels followed over the next years. The first 4 ships constructed formed the first squadron of the Sol station, working up in 2143, with additional vessels forming the core of squadrons in several other systems over the next decade. A second batch would be built to add to the defenses of the UE and its colonies sometime after the completion of the initial series of ships. Although the vessels had initially been built to combat the occasional Nausicaan or Orion raider, contact with the Klingon Empire, the Xindi War, and subsequent tensions with the highly aggressive and expansionist Romulan Star Empire meant that the ships saw plenty of combat during the busy decade of the 2150s, by which point the ships were already falling rapidly behind the curve of technological capability. The Neptune class saw significant action during the Romulan War, where they often found themselves as the sole vessels defending human colonies from fleets of Romulan invaders. Because of the spread-out nature of their deployment across the UE and its colonies, the Neptune did not see much use in major fleet actions. Likely a good thing considering their low speed and light armament, which would have dragged UE task forces significantly in speed for very little gain. Although production of the type had ended in the 2140s and was not restarted, in addition to high combat losses suffered by the type in the early war, a few Neptunes would see service until the end of the conflict. These 3 ships, Minerva, Apollo, and Hercules, were deployed to outlying colonies before the war in response to preliminary Romulan raids on UE colonies and installations. It seems Romulan intelligence was unaware of the ship's presence in the systems they were assigned, due to the recent nature of their arrival, and so the Star Empire made no particular effort to find them and hunt them down, in contrast to their sisters deployed to other systems where the Romulans were aware of their presence. This allowed the 3 ships to survive the initial Romulan advances. Now alive but behind enemy lines, the three ships would each independently of one another conduct largely successful raids and ambushes of Imperial warships and supply convoys, proving to be serious thorns in the Romulan sides throughout the rest of the war. Although Hercules and Apollo would both be destroyed, at war's end Minerva would survive and would return home to Earth as a vaunted hero. Despite Starfleet's diminished size at the end of the war, it was judged that the small, weak, and slow Neptunes which survived the conflict were too limited in their utility to remain in service. In addition to most ships, Minerva included, requiring significant work. As a result, with the exception of Minerva, which became a museum ship in 2173, after a lengthy restoration, all Neptune-class ships were scrapped, with not a single vessel of the type surviving in active service to receive a new NCC number with the inception of the United Federation of Planets, Starfleet, which saw many other United Earth Starfleet ships transferred to the new organization, though these were of much newer construction and better condition than the older Neptunes. Although their time in service was short and often ended in fire and flame, the Neptune nonetheless delivered good service at a time when the final frontier was still very close to the human core. They would be the first class to be built by the new United Earth Combined Starfleet, and virtually the only class the organization operated that did not also serve with its descendant, the Starfleet of the Federation.